Hey everyone, I'm Army Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Prince Charmless. This frog lived in the gardens of King Darren and Queen Luthien's castle. He grew up reading their books and emulating their manners. All he wanted was to become a prince. One day he convinced Belobot to kiss him and realize his dream. But he didn't become a charming prince, but Prince Charmless. And so here we have the origin story of this amazing monster. I gotta say, I really love this monster design. I'm not sure why there's no juvenile form in the monster wiki. I don't know if maybe the monster just doesn't have one at all. I don't think so. That shouldn't be the case. That's only the War Masters that don't have a juvenile form. But anyhow, that being said, let's get into the analysis. I am so eager to talk about this monster. Before we start, you should know that as of the time I'm recording this video, there's a total of 41 nature legendary monsters. And so I'm going to be comparing Prince Charmless to those monsters. So starting off, he has a power of 3454, which is actually the 8th highest power stat in the nature category. It actually puts him in 13th place, tied with monsters like Kiridar and Clivia, so it's a pretty high power stat. As for his life of 26,239, that may seem a little low. Well, you're not wrong, it's actually very low. Out of the 41 nature legendary monsters, this puts him in 39th place. That's right, he only has a higher life than two other monsters, Furious, Robin, and Sylvanus. So he's definitely not tanky, he has a very poor life, he's incredibly squishy. But I also will say that doesn't matter too much. As long as you can go first, if you manage to get a turn with this monster, you're pretty much guaranteed to win. And we'll talk about that once we go to skills. As for his speed, he has 3498, which is the fastest speed in the nature category. He's tied for first place with monsters like Talkia and Living Forest. So incredible speed stat, really high power stat, and a sad life unfortunately. But again, doesn't matter too much considering he's an attacker. As for his trait, he has the Hardened trait. All status effects have a 20% less accuracy against it, and on top of that, he's immune to poison. I am so darn glad that we have nature monsters that didn't just have a bad trait like immunity to poison and nothing else. He has Hardened on top of being immune to poison, so that's amazing. Unfortunately for this monster, one very odd thing is that he's only in the Good Legions book, so you're not going to be getting too much usage out of him. I would have liked to see this monster in more books. Maybe Social Point should open up a fairy tale book. I think there are so many fairy tale monsters that have been released by now. And then maybe you can even throw him into a Families book just because he has this connection with Bella, King Darren, and everything. But maybe that's too much of a stretch. Anyhow, as of right now, he's only in Good Legions, and of course he's a nature monster, so his usage for Team Wars is kind of limited. As for his relic slots, he can hold the Sword Relic and the Mask Relic. And starting off with the Sword Relics, I think the one I would recommend the most would be the Ice Breaking Greatsword, because this will give this monster a shield if he attacks someone who's frozen or stunned. So if you have a team combination where you have a denier go first, the denier can immobilize the enemy monsters by freezing or by stunning. That's really great because they can give your monster a shield, which will really help him out because he's incredibly squishy. But if you happen to have the amazing Jakugan sword, this is really what you want to give this monster, because this sword, after hitting, if the target's life is below 50%, it deals extra damage to the enemy monster, physical damage. And let me tell you, it is going to be so easy to get the enemy monster below 50% with Prince Charmless. And then as for the mask, you have a couple different uses you can do. For one, if you're worried about stamina, you can give this monster the energy mask. If he's hit, he's going to regain X points of stamina depending on the level. Or you can give this monster the healing mask if you're worried about HP. Once again, he's incredibly squishy, so if the enemy monsters happen to attack the monster, your Prince Charmless, and he drops below 50%, he's going to heal by X amount of life. Or if you just want to go the straight brute route, you want to give him Baltasar's mask if you happen to have it. This mask pretty much just increases your monster's HP by X amount of points depending on the level for 2 turns, which means you get a lot of usage out of that first initial attack and that second initial attack. And so with all that said, I should let you guys know, although many of you probably already know by now, this monster is being dubbed the Voltic of the nature category because he has extra turn skills, and in fact he has 5 extra turn skills, which pretty much means this monster is AI proof because it doesn't matter what the AI actually does on defense, it's going to be something that's going to generate the extra turn so he can attack endlessly. And in terms of offense, well, it's automatically like a guaranteed victory if you happen to attack with this monster because you can just attack over and over again. Now the main thing you have to watch out for now is the anticipation trait, which Faraday has and which Taijin has. So be careful about going into those battles, and if you're ever in a team wars where you know the opponent can use a Faraday or a Taijin against your Prince Charmless, you might not want to put him on defense. But other than that, if this monster is on defense, you got to be really careful. You want to make sure you take him out before he gets a turn in, because if not, he's going to take you down. And with that said, let's jump into the skills. His ultimate attack, Great Swordsman, Best Singer, deals insane special damage to all enemies, applies bleeding to all enemies, 75 special base damage to all of the enemy monsters, And on top of that, if they happen to survive, it's also going to affect bleeding, which will reduce their enemy's HP by 15% for the next 3 turns, and also reduce their damage output by 20% for the next 3 turns. And I really have nothing bad to say about this. It's just a pretty straightforward ultimate. You know, Voltic has the same thing where he just deals an insane amount of damage, but the cool thing about this skill is that it deals an additional bleeding on top of it. In skills group 1, we do have one skill worth talking about. Rapier and Hat deals low nature damage to one enemy, gives 1 extra turn to itself, 25 nature-based damage to a single enemy monster, 27 stamina cost, and a 1 turn cooldown. Having this 1 turn cooldown makes it easier to spam attacks. Now the one thing I will say is that you don't really necessarily need it because he has 4 more skills in skills group 2 and 3 that grant you an extra turn, and that you don't really need that 1 turn cooldown to cycle. But I thought I would mention this skill just in case you want to run it for some reason. The biggest advantage to this skill I would say is the 27 stamina cost. Because by having this skill, if your monster was to have 0 stamina and have stamina regen, you would actually be able to attack. But that's really assuming you didn't have a stamina rune on this monster. And to be honest, you're going to run this monster just like Voltic. You're going to want to give him 1 stamina rune. So even with stamina regen, he would recover way more than 28 stamina. So honestly, I don't personally think you need skills group 1, Rapier and Hat. I haven't exactly calculated, but I'm pretty sure you can do without it. So let's skip over to skills group 2. Really quickly, we'll talk about Save the Kingdom. Deals very heavy special damage to one enemy, applies nature weakness to an enemy, 55 damage, 55 special base damage, 24 stamina cost, 1 turn cooldown. You don't need this skill at all. My Own Sweat deals heavy nature damage to one enemy, applies poison to an enemy, 60 nature based damage, 25 stamina, 1 turn cooldown, and it poisons. Pretty darn powerful skill on its own. I will say, ever since Faraday got released, I've seen more and more Voltics have a skill that doesn't grant him an extra turn for when you put him on defense. You know, you go into the battle thinking that your Faraday is going to win you the game, and suddenly Voltic just does a really strong electrodynamic aggression, and then you're kind of left stunned like, oh, he was supposed to attack endlessly and Faraday was supposed to use anticipation. That didn't work out. So that could actually be a potential reason to run My Own Sweat. If you're putting this monster on defense and you want your AI to have some sort of counter against enemies that bring a Taijin or a Faraday. And so that's all I'll say about that skill. Let's move on to Entangled Cloak. Deals moderate nature damage to one enemy, gives 1 extra turn to itself, requires cooldown. Here we have 35 nature based damage, 30 stamina cost, and a 2 turn cooldown. Because this has a 2 turn cooldown, this is really the only skill you need to spam your other skills from skills group 3. You don't really need the 1 turn cooldown from Hat over here. And so with that said, let's move on to skills group 3. Epic Quest. Alright, I really love this skill. Deals moderate special damage to an enemy, and it applies nature weakness to an enemy, and it grants you 1 extra turn. So 40 special base damage to a single enemy monster, 38 stamina cost, 3 turn cooldown, but that monster you hit will have nature weakness, which means your nature attacks will be 50% stronger. And all you have are nature attacks, really. Hat Thrown, Sweaty Blade, Entangled Cloak, which means your next attacks are really going to pack a punch. Which means if there's one main enemy threat you need to focus on, you can give him that nature weakness and then you can hit him hard with your nature based attacks. That is just so amazing that he has a setup skill that grants him an extra turn. And speaking of the skills you can set up for, one of them is Sweaty Blade. Deals heavy nature damage to an enemy, applies poison to an enemy, gives 1 extra turn to itself, 45 nature based damage, 33 stamina cost, 3 turn cooldown, and it grants poison to the enemy monster. Poison will reduce the enemy's HP by 10% for the next 4 turns, and it also reduces the damage output by 20%. Now, the one thing I will say about poison is, most likely I predict you won't really be needing to kill the enemy with poison. By the time they get a turn in, they're not going to get a turn in, you're going to win the battle. But the cool thing is, if for some reason they happen to be alive, if they're a monster that's incredibly tanky, an Oros, an Agursis, someone with a high HP amount, at least that poison has a chance to maybe take them out, and even if it doesn't take them out, it at least reduces damage output they're going to be inflicting on your team. So that honestly is pretty cool. But let's talk about the next skill, Hat Thrown. This skill deals very heavy nature damage to one enemy, gives 1 extra turn to itself, 55 nature based damage, 34 stamina cost, and a 3 turn cooldown. So comparing to Sweaty Blade, which deals 45 damage for 33 stamina cost, Hat Thrown is superior in terms of just raw damage output. And so most of the time to take out an enemy monster, to finish them off, you're probably going to want to combo Epic Quest and Hat Thrown, and then you can just squeeze in Sweaty Blade and Entangled Cloak wherever you need to. So let me just make sure my calculation is correct. If you start the game off with Epic Quest and then Hat Thrown, and then you Sweaty Blade someone, you should be able to do Entangled Cloak, and that extra turn you'll be able to repeat the process all over again. You'll be able to do Epic Quest, you'll be able to do Hat Thrown again, and Sweaty Blade. So Epic Quest, that's turn 1, has a 3 turn cooldown. Use Hat Thrown, this has a 2 turn cooldown. Use Sweaty Blade, this has a 1 turn cooldown. Use Entangled Cloak, cooldown is gone. Yeah, you can pretty much cycle like this over and over as long as you need to. If I'm wrong about this, please make sure to let me know in the comments below, because if you absolutely had to run the skill group 1 skill, I would say get rid of Sweaty Blade. I think that's the least skill that you need. I think Epic Quest, Hat Throne, Entangled Cloak, and Rapier and Hat would be good if you weren't able to cycle this, but again, I'm pretty sure you are, so this is actually my recommended skill set. Entangled Cloak, Epic Quest, Hat Throne, and Sweaty Blade. And what can I say, this monster is pretty straightforward. You run him on your team, he's a nature version of Voltic, you're pretty much going to win your battle super easily. He's undisputably the best nature attacker we have so far, as long as you're not fighting a Taijin or a Faraday. And then for those of you that are interested in running My Own Sweat just for when you put your Prince Charmless on defense, in that case I would recommend Skills Group 1, Rapier and Hat, My Own Sweat, Entangled Cloak, and Epic Quest. I personally think that would be the best skill set to put on a Charmless on defense, just again because you need a way to counter the Faraday and the Taijin. But most of the time, most players, considering you only have one Prince Charmless, you're gonna want to go with the 4 extra turn skills, just like most Voltic builds. That's what you're gonna want. So Entangled Cloak, Epic Quest, Hat Throne, and Sweaty Blade. As for the rune setup, once again, it's the exact same thing as Voltic. Give him a Strength rune, your highest level Strength rune, give him a Speed rune or a Team Speed rune, and give him a Stamina rune, your highest level Stamina rune. And as far as a quick little comparison to Voltic, the one bad thing Prince Charmless doesn't have that Voltic does have is a 0 cooldown skill, meaning that if you were to get hit with cooldowns activated, unfortunately you're going to be down. And depending on what skill set you run, you might be down for longer. Honestly, I'm glad I mentioned that because that might be a reason to actually run Rapier and Hat instead of Entangled Cloak. Because you see, let's say you were to get hit with the enemy cooldowns activated, if you were to run Entangled Cloak in all of Skills Group 3, you wouldn't be able to move for 2 turns. So you'd be really out of luck there. However, if you ran Skills Group 1 skill, Rapier and Hat, you'd only have to wait 1 turn before you can start attacking. After that initial turn of having to recharge, then you'd be able to do Rapier and Hat, and then if you're running out of Skills Group 3, you'd kind of be in a bind again because you'd have to wait 1 more turn. But if you were to run Rapier and Hat, Entangled Cloak, and then 2 of the Skills Group 3 skills, Epic Quest and Hat Throne, then you'd only have to wait 1 turn before being able to cycle. So take a look at this, you get hit with cooldowns activated, okay, you recharge. On your next turn, if you're still alive, you use Hat, and then use Entangled Cloak, then you can do Epic Quest, Hat Throne, and then you're free to cycle however you want. So you know what, that might be a better skill set if you're really concerned about cooldowns activated. Again, it's not a foolproof, but it just gives you a chance to respond. Rapier and Hat, Entangled Cloak, Epic Quest, and Hat Throne. That's once again because you don't necessarily need Sweaty Blade. So very interesting, as I'm going through this analysis, I myself am finding that there might be a better skill set than just running all of Skills Group 3 and Entangled Cloak. It appears I'm really gonna have to think about this a little more, because I'm really liking this a lot more, Entangled Cloak and Rapier and Hat, just to be a little more safer, right? Because to be completely honest, you don't really need all of these skills. Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna give that more thought. But once again, as far as runes, give them a Strength rune, give them a Stamina rune, and then give them either Speed or Team Speed. That's gonna depend on your team dynamic. And then as far as the skill set, well, do you want 3 extra turn skills? Do you want all 4 extra turn skills? If you do want all 4 extra turn skills, I would recommend Epic Quest, Hat Throne as your guaranteed skills. If you do want all 4 extra turn skills, I would recommend Epic Quest and Hat Throne for sure. Entangled Cloak also really worth having. And then it's up to you, do you want Sweaty Blade or do you want Skills Group 1, Rapier and Hats? And for those of you that want to run My Own Sweat, well then run that skill, Entangled Cloak, Epic Quest, and Rapier and Hats. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for this analysis on Prince Charmless. Please let me know what you thought about this video, and more importantly, let me know what skill set would you choose on this monster and why. Why do you choose one skill over another skill? Is there maybe a possibility I missed in my video? Is there still something more you can think about? Please let me know in the comments below. Really eager to hear your guys' thoughts concerning Prince Charmless. We still have a couple of days before I actually get this monster and get to see him in action, so I'm really looking forward to that. So whatever thoughts you guys may have about this monster currently, please let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all next time.